The World Health Organization recently classified processed meats in the same cancer-causing Group 1 carcinogens as tobacco, diesel exhaust, and asbestos. But some scientists fear that our global addiction to meat might pose an even greater threat.
Americans ate more than 100 pounds of red meat per person in 2014. And now Africa and Asia are moving toward that same diet. We spoke to Ken Cook, a food policy expert, about the state of meat production today.
70% of the land devoted to agriculture on the planet is devoted to meat production. That's almost a third of the entire surface area. That many acres producing red meat, pork, chicken, all of that is completely unsustainable. Let's assume that the world population will grow to 9 billion people by 2050. There isn't enough land, there isn't enough water, there isn't the capacity for the Earth's atmosphere to absorb all of the CO2 and the methane that would come out of animal agriculture. The problem is that our focus is on making the meat as cheap as possible. And as they cut those corners, that's where we often have environmental catastrophes.
The demand for meat is going to increase, and there's no way with the current livestock production method that we can match that demand. So that will put a lot of pressure on food security. If we would all say, let's refrain from eating meat 5 days a week, it would work out fine. But we're not doing that.
We're actually doing the polar opposite. Global meat production has quadrupled since the 1960s. And by 2050, it'll increase by half again.
There's a hell of a lot of resources that go into a feedlot like this. I mean, water, energy, absolutely everything is done for maximum efficiency, and that means that each one of these cattle gets to eat about 48 pounds every single day.
Feeding all these cattle is already a massive operation. And Pedro's planning on doubling his production just to keep up with global demand.
So what is this that they're mixing up here?
This is corn silage.
And how much feed do the cows eat every day?
450 tons per day.
450 tons a day?
Yeah.
Wow.
This system is called a Concentrated Animal Feeding Operation, or CAFO. This CAFO is designed to make these cattle gain nearly 400 pounds in just 90 days. In the dry High Plains region, many feed crops draw water from the Ogallala aquifer, which is now losing water faster than it can be replenished.
It takes about 2,500 gallons of water to produce a bushel of corn. And if an animal eats 50 bushels of corn in its time in the feedlot, we're looking at about 125,000 gallons of water per animal under the industrial model.
So when it comes to those industrial scale feedlots, the majority of the water that they're using actually goes into producing the corn.
That's correct. And the reason that JBS has a big feedlot at Yuma, Colorado is because there's water. And they don't pay one dime for that water. And they pay below the cost of production of that corn. The corn is the cheapest thing that we can feed because we buy it below cost of production. The water is subsidizing that operation.
Mike showed us the scale of land and water used by the giant meat producers here.
So we're just flying over Yuma County in Colorado. This is one of the huge scale feedlots. You've got 100,000 cattle in this one feedlot down here. Is this all corn down here, these circular
Yes, basically all the circles that you're seeing here are corn.
That's a lot of cornfields.
Everywhere you see a circle is pumping water. I think we have to have a true cost accounting going into these production models. The reason that these big companies can do what they do is because they've got the power to externalize so many of their costs, whether it's water, whether it's the pollution of the soil with the overuse of chemicals in the production of the crops, environmental damage. That's how we're able to get a dollar burger at McDonald's. And we're not thinking about the future. We're only thinking about the short term.
Meat production globally is an environmental disaster now. If we try and expand meat production to reach 9 billion people by 2050, it will be a complete, unthinkable disaster.
Meat production in Brazil is so land-intensive that it's responsible for more than 2/3 of the deforestation of the Brazilian Amazon. But it's using up more than just our land, because producing a single pound of meat requires over 1,800 gallons of water. And that's just one part of a food production system that may be threatening the single most important resource that we have.
Dr. Antonio Nobre, climatologist at the National Institute of Amazonian Research, believes that the causes of the crisis originate 2,000 miles away in the Amazon rainforest.
The water that irrigates 70% of South America comes from the Amazon. Otherwise, this area would be a desert. If you deforest it, you lose rainfall.
So the trees are actually fighting
the drought.
Fighting the drought.
Exactly. They're fighting the drought. In the South America, you have the Amazon here producing humongous amount of moisture, pumping invisible water vapor in the atmosphere. The ecosystem knows that pumping water into the atmosphere will lower pressure, pull moist air from the ocean, and counter the drought.
Without water, there's no food. Without water, there's no energy. Without water, there's no life. Where are we going to be 50 years from now if we don't take any action? We'll be in the post-apocalypse. The apocalypse will have happened.